Undercover boss buys coffee at neighborhood café, discovers the one change that helps staff afford groceries. Michael Foster sat silently in the corner of the breakfast cafe. A steaming cup of coffee in his hand, his breath came in quick, short bursts. The yellow light illuminated his face, pensive, tense. Olivia, the young waitress, approached her hand trembling as she placed a plate of pastries on the table. Her eyes revealed deep exhaustion, dark circles etched beneath her eyelids. Her voice trembled softly. I don't have enough money to buy basic necessities. Michael froze. The coffee cup shook in his hand. His eyes seemed frozen. A tear rolled down Olivia's cheek, glistening under the yellow light. Michael's gaze grew stern, his eyebrows furrowed. He clenched his teeth. This has to stop. Michael Foster sat still in the familiar breakfast cafe, a place that had once echoed with laughter and the warmth of hardworking people. Outside, the morning sun danced through the glass, leaving patches of light scattered across the tiled floor, as if the past and present were mixing together. I am Michael Foster, he began, his voice deep and slow, his eyes seemingly seeing through the cramped space of the cafe, resting on each familiar face. Founder of this famous breakfast cafe chain, that voice no longer carried a hollow introduction, but was filled with nostalgia, like an old tune being replayed in the middle of the bustling city. He looked around, saw the old wooden tables worn from time, the loose screws on chairs, each scratch on the tabletop like scars left behind by countless long shifts. I always believed this was a second home for every employee. His voice faltered a bit, as if pulled back by memories of those fresh mornings when he himself brewed the first coffee for a regular customer. The camera followed Michael's footsteps as he stepped away from the corner, his hands trembling slightly. He wore a simple light blue shirt, his sleeves rolled up like an ordinary customer. No longer the CEO in a fancy suit and neatly tied tie, he looked like a part of this cafe, part of the past he had once nurtured with all his faith and care. He blended in with the people having breakfast, his eyes searching. Employees bustled back and forth, carrying trays of pastries, sweat dripping down their cheeks, the yellow light highlighting the dark circles under their eyes. He remembered the old days when every morning started with a familiar question. How are you today? Now that question seemed to have vanished amidst the relentless grind of work. The camera focused on freshly baked bagels, steaming cups of coffee, but everything seemed still cold. No more laughter behind the bakery counter, no more quiet chatter during breaks. Only the steady beep of the POS machine, an emotionless mechanical sound. A young employee momentarily bowed his head to avoid Michael's gaze, then quickly slipped past the customer tables like a shadow. Michael closed his eyes, gently sighed, and lightly squeezed his hot coffee cup. Part of him wanted to call all the employees together, ask how they were, hug them like he used to. But he knew everything had changed. Changed since the day numbers became the boss, and the sighs of weariness were silenced under the weight of revenue targets. The yellow light continued to shine on Michael's face, the face of a man who had spent his whole life building a brand he believed to be a second home for thousands of people. But now his eyes only saw distance, loneliness, and the fear seeping through each employee's gaze. Michael took a deep breath, his chest trembling as memories wove together the bright laughter of those first days, the whirring sound of the coffee machine as the morning shift began the calls to share freshly baked goods. All of it felt like an old movie playing in his mind, fading under the dim yellow light. He sat down at a table, his eyes searching his hand, gliding lightly over the old wooden surface, feeling each scratch, each handprint of those who had once passed through here. The yellow light shone down, creating a faint halo around his face. He sighed, his voice dropping low, almost like a whisper, just for himself. This is why I had to come back. Michael leaned back against the familiar wooden chair, his breath slowing as he took in the breakfast cafe's atmosphere. The coffee machine hummed steadily, the yellow light shining down, revealing beads of sweat on the foreheads of the busy staff. Part of the cafe still held its old warmth, the smell of toasted bread, the clinking of dishes, but another part felt cloaked in an invisible mist, cold enough to send shivers down his spine. Near the pause counter, a young employee, his hair neatly combed, his apron crisp, walked with a confident stride. His eyes glistened with a defiant look Michael had never seen in those who once stood behind the bakery counter with him. The young man smiled as he approached the pause machine, his fingers gliding smoothly over the screen like a performer. The blue glow from the screen reflected on his face, making it cold, expressionless. In that moment, Michael caught a glimpse of his eyes that knew they were manipulating something and weren't afraid of being caught. Michael watched every movement of the young man. A quick tap, a shifty glance, and then a tips number suddenly disappeared from the list. Each tap felt like a knife, slicing through Michael's memories of the old days, when he personally divided tips fairly, when he smiled at every employee, called them by name like a close friend. Across the cafe, Olivia was clearing table number 4. Her hands trembled as she gathered the dirty dishes, the yellow light falling on her disheveled hair, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes, the undeniable signs of long nights working overtime. Michael remembered the bright-eyed girl from those early days, her beaming eyes, when he placed the first freshly baked pastry on her tray, the sound of her laughter during the morning shift. Now that same look, those eyes that once called him Boss Michael with pride, held only exhaustion and a faint glimmer of fragile hope. Every time Olivia looked toward Michael, her eyes would light up with a spark of hope as if waiting for something. But just a second later, that spark would be extinguished when the manager passed by, his gaze cold as midnight water, enough to crush every flicker of hope. Olivia lowered her head, her shoulders trembling slightly as if swallowing all the pain and words she could not say. Michael felt a slow burning anger in his chest, mixed with a nameless guilt. He remembered an image of himself, the man who once stood behind the bakery counter, sprinkling powdered sugar over freshly baked pastries, his warm smile, as he distributed tips fairly to everyone. He remembered Olivia's eyes when she received her first tip, eyes shining with trust and humanity. The POS machine beeped, once a familiar sound, now echoing like a funeral dirge. Michael glanced at the screen. A tip amount had been brutally altered, disappearing as if it had never existed. His heart ached, his eyes blazing. Did I let this happen? Michael took a deep breath, trying to hold back the fury that was about to explode inside him. His eyes scanned the room, every old wooden table, every chipped chair he'd once nailed together himself when the cafe was new. This place, the one he'd once called family, now felt like a tragic stage. Each step he took on the wooden floor made a dry, brittle sound like his own heavy heartbeat. He spotted a young girl wiping a table in the back corner, her eyes darting nervously, her hand trembling as she set down a coffee cup that hadn't yet been washed. Her face looked gaunt, her cheeks hollowed as if she hadn't had a proper breakfast, making Michael's breath catch in his throat. He remembered the promise he'd once made. Here, every employee is respected like family. But now that image was only a memory as distant as a dream. Over by the POS counter, a dim blue light from the screen illuminated the face of a young employee. Michael noticed the young man's fingers moving skillfully, his eyes glancing at the manager with a smug expression. A fleeting smile appeared on the young man's lips, a smile that made Michael shiver like this boy was snuffing out the flame of fairness that he had once worked so hard to ignite for Sunrise Breakfast Joint. The POS beeped again, sounding like a hammer striking Michael's heart. Michael recalled the first morning he'd installed the POS system. Back then, he'd told himself, this will make everything more transparent so that everyone gets paid fairly for what they contribute. But now that very system was being abused, turning into a double-edged sword that sliced the trust he'd built. He turned to look at Olivia, the girl he'd once believed would embody the pride of a whole generation of staff. She was wiping the bagel tray, her hands trembling so much that the bread nearly fell from her grasp. When her eyes met his, there was a flicker of fragile hope, as if begging him to do something. But then the manager's figure swept by, his gaze cold as stone, leaving a harsh look on Olivia's face, a look of intimidation. Olivia lowered her head, her shoulders trembling, letting her tears fall on the warm bread. Michael stood frozen, his hand clenched so tightly it turned white. A cold, mocking laugh rang out from the POS counter, a harsh, cynical sound. Michael spun around and caught the young employee's gaze. The boy was looking at him, his eyes full of challenge and sarcasm, as if saying, "Do you really think you can change this?" Michael felt a burning anger in his chest, but at the same time, he also felt pain. Pain for having let everything slip from his grasp. He remembered the early days, the misty mornings when he personally placed each loaf of bread onto a tray, arranged each slice of fresh orange on the salad plate, and smiled when he heard the staff laughing cheerfully. Now the yellow light still shone down on those loaves, but the warmth of humanity had faded, leaving only anxious, tired eyes. Michael heard the POS machine beep again, this time sounding like a wake-up call. He looked up, his eyes blazing with the fire of a founder, a father watching his brainchild being betrayed. His heart ached, but at the same time, a strong resolve ignited within him. I let this happen, and I will be the one to fix it. The camera zoomed in on Michael's eyes, the yellow light illuminating every crow's foot etched by time, every drop of sweat shed for this place. The POS beeped once more, this time sounding like a drumbeat in his chest. Michael clenched his fist, looked up at the manager, his eyes like a blade cold and bright as steel. His voice resounded in his head, echoed throughout the room, and rang out in his own heart. It's time to stand up. This climax pushed the story to its breaking point, leaving YouTube viewers unable to look away. They would ask themselves, would Michael stay silent, or would he be the one to rekindle the flame of justice at Sunrise Breakfast Joint? Michael took a deep breath, then stood up, the wooden chair creaking like an alarm bell for the entire breakfast joint. The yellow light shone down, revealing his face, the face of a man who once stood behind the counter, dusting pastries with sugar, the founder who once called this place a second home. He looked around, his eyes determined, his voice low but ringing like a church bell in the quiet morning. "I am Michael Foster, the founder of this breakfast joint." A ripple of whispers spread through the cafe. The clinking of knives and forks against ceramic fell silent, leaving only the sound of the POS beeping like a scream of a truth revealed. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a stack of tattered papers, undeniable evidence. He held each sheet high, the yellow light illuminating the bold black letters, manipulated tips, unfair shift schedules, threatening messages to employees. Each paper felt like a dagger carving into the hearts of those standing silently in the room. His voice hardened each word like a hammer blow, shattering the wall of deceit. "This is your sweat and tears stolen by the very managers who were supposed to protect you." A moment of silence stretched taut like a violin string. The manager near the POS counter bowed his head, his shoulders trembling like leaves in the wind. The blue light from the POS screen reflected on his face, pale and anxious. Michael looked at him, his eyes bright as a blade, showing no mercy. His eyes swept across each employee, those who had helped him build Sunrise Breakfast Joint. A young female employee placed her hand on her chest, her eyes bright with a flickering hope that had yet to fade. Michael saw Olivia standing by the bagel tray, her hands trembling slightly, her eyes glistening with tears. The yellow light shone down on those eyes, making them sparkle like a star in a dark sky. Michael raised the stack of papers high, his voice ringing out each word like a solemn vow. "From today, every single tip must go to the one who truly deserves it." The POS machine beeped again, this time sounding like the cry of justice itself, coming alive. The eyes of the staff turned to him as if seeing a father, a teammate, a person ready to stand up and protect them. Olivia's eyes shone with trust, like a flame igniting in the night. Could this be the moment Sunrise Breakfast Joint is reborn? Michael clenched the stack of papers tightly in his hand, each finger straining as if to hold on to the last warmth of a truth that was being revealed. A cold draft swept across the breakfast cafe floor, carrying with it whispers of fear, wary glances, and the anxious breaths of those who had once placed their trust in this place. He took a deep breath, his breathing heavy, as if he were shouldering the entire weight of the thickened atmosphere in the room. Beads of sweat on his temples sparkled under the yellow light, reflecting the image of a man no longer young, but whose eyes still burned with resilience. He looked at Olivia for a long time, the girl with trembling hands, eyes that once shone with hope but had been dimmed by senseless rules and deceitful tricks. Now those eyes were bright once more, so bright that he saw his own younger self in them back when every tip was fairly shared and every loaf of bread was personally handed over with a warm smile. Michael's hand trembled as he raised the stack of papers, his voice louder and stronger than ever. "Today I am no longer the CEO sitting on high. I am a companion, a colleague, and the very founder of this home. And I will not let anyone crush your dreams one more time." A wave of emotion swept through the crowd like a small storm rising in everyone's eyes. A staff member by the POS wiped a tear that had just fallen down their cheek. A young male employee, tall and lean, who had once been taught by Michael to make coffee, looked at him, his lips pressed tight, his eyes blazing. "We still believe in you." Michael felt his own heartbeat echoing, joining the beep of the POS machine, now no longer a cold sound, but the drumbeat that heralded a small revolution. He gripped the coffee mug on the table tightly, his eyes sweeping across each person, each face, faces that had once called him by the familiar name, Boss Michael. The yellow light shone down, casting bright streaks across the wooden table like rays of hope, breaking through after a long dark night. The manager's voice stammered, his shoulders trembling, his eyes shifting uneasily. I was just following the system's rules." Michael raised his head high. His voice sharpened each word, slicing through the air like a blade. "No. The system has the right to trample on the sweat of those who built this brand. No report can ever replace trust." Olivia's eyes met his, glistening with tears mixed with a smile. She gave a small nod like a silent thank you. In that moment, Michael saw not just gratitude from a young woman, but a promise. "We will never let this place grow cold again." The tense atmosphere now seemed to melt into gentle beams of light. An elderly customer sitting near the window placed his hand over his heart, his eyes warm as he looked at Michael. "You did the right thing." Michael turned to Olivia, his voice lowered but echoing throughout the cafe. "Olivia, from today on, you will be the shift manager. You will be the guiding light for the others because I trust you more than any report." Applause broke out from a corner of the cafe, then spread rolling into a wave of bright, enthusiastic clapping. The POS machine beeped once more this time, sounding like agreement, like the heartbeat returning to Sunrise Breakfast Joint. Olivia stood at the bagel counter, clipboard in hand, the yellow light illuminating her face, showing her radiant smile and eyes filled with confidence. She was instructing a group of new employees, young faces, eyes full of both eagerness and shyness. Each of her words was clear, firm, and carried not just the method of doing the work, but also the warmth of a place that had once been her second home. A place where she once only knew how to bow her head and tremble through long, exhausting shifts. The newly installed POS system displayed each tip amount clearly, every dollar shown transparently going to the right person. No more unfair tip sharing, no more secret keystrokes stealing others' sweat. The beep now rang out like a harmony of justice and transparency. Michael stood quietly in a corner of the cafe, his hands in his coat pockets, his eyes following Olivia with unhidden pride. The yellow light reflected off the sweat still on his temple, a testament to the days he had fought to preserve the soul of Sunrise Breakfast Joint. His heart beat slower but deeper, more resolute. He looked at Olivia, her eyes meeting his, her smile radiant, her eyes glistening with trust. Michael gave a slight nod, like a silent thank you, like a message. You did it. Amidst that warm atmosphere, he realized success wasn't measured by the cold numbers on a report, but by the confident eyes and the sincere smiles of the people who had built this brand with their hearts. That was the Sunrise Breakfast Joint he had once believed in. The POS machine beeped again, this time sounding like a sigh of justice. A group of young customers near the window smiled as they looked toward the bagel counter where Olivia was chatting with the new staff. A middle-aged man, a regular, who had once shaken his head in dismay when he saw tips being stolen, now nodded slowly, his eyes full of trust. Michael gave a faint smile, then lifted his gaze to the Sunrise Breakfast Joint logo, neatly hung on the warm wooden wall. The yellow light shone on it like the first rays of dawn after a long night. He thought to himself, one tear changed an entire system. Michael stood tall in the middle of the breakfast joint, his shoulders slightly trembling, but his eyes shone bright, the eyes of a man who had weathered all the doubts, the sleepless nights, the tears of his employees, and who now carried the bout east. Eyes of a man who had rediscovered the flame of justice. He looked straight into the camera, his voice deep and firm. If you believe that justice is not just the numbers in a report, but lives in every drop of sweat, every smile of the people who built real value, please share this video. Michael nodded, his eyes sparkling with trust, as if he was speaking directly to every viewer. Subscribe so you don't miss the real stories of justice. The yellow light illuminated the table where Michael Foster, the CEO of the cafe chain, sat silently, his eyes still following the movements of his staff. The young waitress Olivia, who once confessed, I don't have enough money for necessities now, stood confidently at the POS counter, her hands deftly working, her voice warm as she guided the new colleague. Michael smiled softly, remembering the moment he discovered a small change that made a huge difference. Fair and transparent tip sharing, simply applying the correct policy to distribute tips based on hours worked and actual workload, ensuring no manager or staff member could secretly take another's share. That seemingly simple change had made a big difference, allowing Olivia and the staff to have enough money for their essentials from breakfast to rent. Now Olivia and her colleagues could work with peace of mind, no longer having to skip meals or worry about money for necessities. Her eyes shone with the trust that every effort deserved to be rewarded. This transparent tip-sharing policy could be implemented within a day without any complicated process. All it took was Michael's signature and a directive to the managers to apply it immediately. A single click on the POS and a short meeting with staff had transformed the entire system, bringing fairness and hope to everyone. How many more waitresses are living on tips they never get? Comment below and share to spread this story.